Howdy, howdy, hey, how are you doing today? I'm the Moon Frog, and in this one, I welcome you to our second episode of Crunch Time, our mini-series where we get this engine in this car and ready for doing a burnout for August 15th. So stick around and enjoy the process.
I didn't remember the moon being that far away.
So in the last episode, we tackled the drive shaft and setting the rear end. So now we have a fully mounted rear end ready to be driven. And what we need now is power so we can spin those tires. So in this one, we're going to be tackling the engine refreshing. Basically, we're going to swap out the gasket kit and make sure it's all sealed up and ready to run. At the same time, we're going to go steal a few parts from a 454 that we have back there and slap them on this bad girl so we can have a complete engine. And while the engine is out, it's going to be a great time to get to our hind joint steering and make sure that is dialed in. Right now we have a little bit of slop. We still need to drill the steering knuckles and make sure we have the right bolt so everything tightens up. And while we're at it, we might start working a little bit on the rust. If you've watched some previous videos, you might have noticed that this car has definitely seen some better days, and we're about to bring it back to some even better days. But before we get into that, let's get this engine tore up and sealed up. So we got her pulled apart and well, she's basically ready to start cleaning up, and we have a lot of cleaning up to do. So in most areas she is pretty clean. It is very acceptable, but if you can see here, there's some rust, a little bit of rust over here, some rust over there. That rust has to go before we lay a gasket on there, just to make sure our surface is perfectly smooth and flat. So that way when we pinch it in, we are sure it seals good. So that's gonna need some cleaning. This head is going to need a lot of cleaning. But that's how the whole block looked before, and I just hit it with a brass wire brush, just very lightly, and it came right out. So we're gonna give the head the same treatment. After I get all this stuff cleaned up, then we can start installing our Velcro gasket kit, and that should seal the deal. So let's start cleaning up. We'll tune back in once it's time to start slapping some stuff together. So it is the next day and I started working on the engine again, and I kind of got a weird surprise. Took the rear cap off to inspect the rear main seal, and it looks like it was basically replaced before storing it. And the only thing is, if you can see in this cap, we got some scuffing, and it's pretty bad. I don't know if you can see the scuffing in here, but that's not usually a good sign. You want your bearing to run smooth, and you don't want to feel that kind of stuff in it. I can literally pick it up with my nail. And there's even a little bit of brass showing in the middle right there. It's not a real good sign. And what we have to do about that is plastigauge it. We're gonna measure, since everything still looks good, the crank is still very smooth. It doesn't look like it was damaged or running poorly. Alright, so since our bearing doesn't look to be in the best of conditions, we're going to make sure this is nice and clean. An accurate measurement. Wash the bearing, and then we will set this aside for a second. Pull our plastigauge out. Alright, so plastigauge. We're going to put this on the crankshaft, like so. Put this little piece over here. And then we will slap this right back on. And tighten it down. And the goal is to squeeze that little piece of plastic at the proper torque specification, and it will squish out to the clearance we have inside of the cap. It's basically a cheap way to measure it. So now I'm gonna find the torque spec on that. I'm gonna take out the torque wrench, snap her down to it, and then we can take it back out and check our measurement. All right, so 95 foot-pounds. Since this is a 2-bolt main, if it was a 4-bolt main, we would have 110 pounds. We're gonna go one to the other, try to get it even as it should be. That's our torque. That's our torque. You don't want to use your torque wrench to take them out. It would uncalibrate your torque wrench. You take your breaker bar and you break them loose again. Just like that. Now we're gonna pull this out and see our measurement. Ew. Alright, well usually it would come out a little clearer than that, but it seems that it felt like splitting up. Now, if you can see these lines, they all have a measurement beside them, and now we're going to put them beside it and compare to find what size we crushed down to. So that would be 2 thou, maybe, something around there. That groove in the center is very concerning. Alright, I'm gonna go check some engine specifications, and we'll see if this is good enough or if we have to go get some bearings. Alright, well, on Google it says 0.0022, which, if we compare it to the plastigauge right in here, this is about what we would have. So even though this is scored to shit, maybe it's still good. Should we be hopeful or should we replace them? So this is not my engine, so I don't really get to make executive decisions. Since that back bearing is kind of fucked up, I'm gonna go ahead and pull a rod bearing out, or not pull the bearing out, but take the cap off, and we're gonna measure at least one rod bearing to see if it's within tolerances. If not, we're gonna have to go for a set of bearings. But let's just hope we're lucky, and if we are, these bearings are at least gonna be good. So here is that. I don't know if it's focusing enough for you to see. It is scored. It does not look as new as the rest of the engine. And I don't know. I'm really hoping they're good enough. But all we can do is clean it up and measure it up. Once we know the measurements, we can tell if it's good or bad. Now, could you imagine this? I always wondered why there was so many measurements on it Well, I'm pretty sure you can just, boom. Now you have one piece of it. And you don't have to worry about the rest of the pack. That's one piece of plastic gauge engaged. Now we put the cap the same way it was. Does that seem right? I don't know. Maybe. I'm just trusting the sheet. 50. 50. And now we take it back out. Alright, so we have our little spot here. Okay, so here we measured out to 0.0015. Might be a little small on those ones. On the main specs, it would say 0022 recommended, and this one would be a little small, I'd say. Oh, nothing but great news today. So let's put that back on. Gotta torque that back down, and yeah. Now we have to talk to Scott, the owner of the engine, to see if he wants to buy some bearings, measure them up, make sure they're good, and slap them in there. Because I don't know if we're going to use this. I mean, oil pressure would be great at just 15, but it's not very forgiving if we pick up a knock. It will grab that bearing and spin it around so fast, you don't even have time to say goodbye. Alright, now let's play the waiting game until we have an answer. Alright, so it is the next day, and it's still crunch time. We never stop crunching. And good news, we have a brand new set of performance bearings. So now we're gonna hop right into what I did not want to do. We have to get everything out of this block. Timing chain, get all the pistons out, get the crankshaft out, and then clean everything up, change those main bearings, slap everything back in, torque everything back down with some nice assembly lube, and then we can start sealing her up. Let's get to work. All right, so I got everything pulled out, and we don't really have good news for you guys. Yesterday, I took the crank bearings out and noticed that those were gone. And now I took the timing chain off with the timing gear, and something fell out from behind there, which wasn't really pleasant to see. Can you guys guess what this is? I'm gonna give you guys a second. What we thought at first was just gonna be a set of main bearings, now turned into the cam bearings. This one is all worn out here, and as I was taking the timing gear out, well, I found the rest of that cam bearing. Now that's not really good news, and that's going to be a lot more money to throw at this engine. Luckily, I'm not paying for it. Thanks, Scott. But yeah, now we're stuck waiting another day, and then tomorrow we'll go see if the speed shop has some performance bearings for the camshaft. And at the same time, we asked a friend if we could borrow his installation tool for those, because they need to be popped out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we need some kind of special tool to get them out and in. So that's gonna be that for this one. We tried rebuilding the engine, but it's gonna take a little longer than expected. I'm gonna go pick up some parts, and we'll be back tomorrow to hopefully start throwing this thing together. And now it is the next day again, and it's still not moving forward all that much. So we're gonna skip ahead, or actually go back on our list. We were trying to refresh our engine. Now we move back to the Heim joints. So if you've been following the build, you might know that at one point I swapped the tie rod ends for Heim joints, and to do so I had to make a sleeve that fit the Heim joint and the Mustang 2 tie rod end, but that's not fully welded, and that's not drilled out to be a straight bolt. So I'm gonna pull all that out, and after that we can slap the steering back in all for good, and then she'll be good and sturdy to swing around and hit full lock without losing steering. The engine is just on standby. We're waiting to go get some bearings. And another little side update. So I've been in contact with the people organizing the Miramichi Rock and Roll Festival. By the looks of it, we might have a spot with that little piece of shit in there. Would you like to see this car in the car show? If you're around Miramichi on the 25th through 28th of July, hopefully you can stop by and check out the car in the car show and see how we built it in person. If we want to have the car in the car show, we better start crunching even more. Now let's get to work. So we got those fully welded. It's looking all right. I mean, it's still just flux core, but it'll do. I have to run to the hardware shop and get some bolts for these holes, and then I have to take the steering knuckle off and drill this size hole right through where it used to be a tapered fit for the tie rod end. So let's do that. We're pulling some big shit right now, and it's quite interesting, so might as well film it. So it's been a few days now, and I have a little update for you guys. So, as you might remember, our cam bearing was shot. So we went looking around for these tools. Turns out they're not the right tools. But anyways, on the upside, I found this aluminum puck, which I am going to turn down 2 size and make my own punch to punch those new bearings in, which we also went and got brand new cam bearings. So now we have new crank bearings, cam bearings, and the connecting rod bearings we're going to reuse for now. If we get a knock or a slap, they will be the first one to be changed again, or for the first time. But yeah, now it's still crunch time. I have a whole bunch of stuff on the go, and I'm going to keep crunching until we get it done. So now let's get to turning. I'm getting sidetracked, and well, any progress is good progress right now. So our next problem here is the rear cam bearing has a cap over it, and to access it way back there, we need to pop that cap off. So I'm gonna take this, shove it all the way through, and we're gonna pop it off, and then we can finish machining our installer tool. Alright, well that took me pretty well all day, and we have a camshaft bearing installer for a big block without spending a single dollar. Now that we have the bearing installer, we can start taking the bearings out, just like I did with the first one, and we'll number them all out. If I find the time, I'll put a measurement on all the new ones compared to the old ones, and we'll have a new set of bearings. So let's get popping the old ones out, and that way we have room to pop the new ones in. All the old bearings are out of there, and now it's getting late, and it's not exactly the best time to be installing fresh bearings in a block, just to make sure I don't forget anything. So we're gonna hop right over to the drill press again, and we're finally gonna get the knuckles done. Alright, so that's our 2 steering knuckles fully drilled out and ready to receive their heim joints, get them fully mounted, and that's our steering. But if you remember, those knuckles were actually flipped. So the one on the left is the one that was on the right, and then vice versa. Why? Because we needed to move our steering forward. You can go back and check out those videos if you want. So I'm gonna slap those back on, put the wheels back on, drop the car back on the ground so it is ready to receive it. Big block and turbo 375. Just get her done. It's crunch time. we got the steering all set up, so that's a plus. But for the engine, for a good old big block 396, not many good news for that yet. So the cam bearings that we went and picked up turned out to be the wrong cam bearings. So believe it or not, they're not all the same. And yeah. So right now we are kind of stuck at a standstill. And this video has to go into editing so you guys can have something to watch on Friday. Which, on this Friday, I will actually be in Halifax filming some skateboard stuff for the Halifax Havoc, which you guys can tune in eventually when that comes out. King of the Road style competition where we take over the streets and fill in some challenges. And this year I'm going to try to actually make a vlog about it maybe. If you're watching and you actually care, let me know in the comments. Would you like to see the adventure as a vlog, or do you just want to see a skate edit and people that are doing dumb shit? I don't know. But now the goal is, before I leave for Halifax, I want to have that full short block assembled, have the rotating assembly rotating, and I'm just really hoping it's gonna happen. So this is it. This is our crunch time episode for this week, and this is as far as the engine is gonna go until at least Tuesday, because I need cam bearings to start on the rest of it. But before we leave, Heim joints completed. I'm still gonna have to get some hardware, some proper bolts, nuts, and maybe some washers for when the Heim joints go up and down. That's not what a frog does. All right. And yeah, up next on the list we have engine refresh, which we were already doing, but it kind of kicked our ass a little bit this week. We'll come back next week and kick its ass. After we have the engine refresh done, we can obviously start wiring, getting some fire to the engine and every other component that we're going to need in the car, which is followed by brakes, trench tunnel, drive shaft loops, fuel system, cooling system, rust repair, seat, finish welding, stiffen springs, shifter, and gas pedal. And then we can go. So with that being said, go out, be rad. Tune in next week.